Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Tonight's video will be entitled The Little Man. Carlos Marcello. Not sure how well my audience knows Carlos Marcello and his role in the clandestine services, the invisible hand that rules over our maritime law society. Bank funded, bank endorsed, bank anthropology planned. We have a planned economy, we have a planned society, we have social engineering, we have crisis actors, we have Screen Actors Guild professional actors, and we have amateur, conscripted, man on the street, clueless buffoons who participate in the social engineering anthropology that is this whatever this is that we live, this meta-universe combat zone. Anyway, Carlos Marcello had at least two nicknames. One was the Little Man, and the other was the Godfather. Now, you should know that when we say Little Man, we're talking about 5'2" tall. All right, 5'2". So not quite a dwarf, but definitely short. But let's review. Who else do we know in history that stood 5'2"? Or for those that are interested in the metric system, we're talking about 1.68 meters tall. Standing 1.68 meters. Well, I'll tell you who we had. It's quite a list. We had a fellow by the name of Charles Miles Maddox. You might have heard of him. The media seems to be hung up on the word Manson. Charlie Manson, who willed Charlie Watson Tex, who the media named Tex. See, none of the people use their real names. The media names you. See, when the world is a stage, and the stage is owned by Warner Brothers, not their real name either, they're the Wansel brothers. But when everything that's presented on national news, radio, newspapers, television is owned by Jewish studios, then they will assign the name of your character. So Charles Miles Maddox was named Manson, and Charlie Watson was renamed Tex. And Susan Atkins, I think she had like 8 different names. Sadie. I don't want to get into all of it. My point is that it's impossible to know who's who unless you do a lot of work. Anyway, other people that you may know of, Charlie Miles Manson, Charles Miles Maddox, stood 5'2". Hey, so did Napoleon. And Napoleon was the emperor of continental Europe. First he was the ruler of France, and then he became the ruler of all of continental Europe. Not Russia, but basically Western Europe. Fell to Napoleon. Now, just before you get too excited, Napoleon is not French. He's Corsican, which is an island near Sardinia, off Italy, off southern France, Corsica. And Napoleon changed his name also to try to sound more French. So the little man, Carlos Marcello, he follows in the footsteps of Napoleon. Anyway, later then we had Charlie Manson, and then we had Sirhan. You may remember he was the scapegoat who was blamed for killing Robert Francis Kennedy on June 5th, 1968 at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles on Wilshire Boulevard. Sirhan, who did not kill RFK. He had a gun. He fired it mostly at the ceiling. He fragged some innocent people who did not die. And it was Thane Eugene Caesar, who also is quite short. I don't have his height, though. I'm going to say he's 5'3". Anyway, Thane Eugene Caesar, a Filipino who works for Lockheed Skunk Works High Security Spy Division, he's the one that murdered Robert Kennedy, and he was the personal security guard assigned to RFK that night. His first and only appearance as a security guard in his entire life was the night that his client was murdered. I'm sure that was just a random coincidence. So then we had William Cowley. He was blamed for the My Lai massacre of 504 innocent women and children and pregnant women and older men in the villages of the hamlet of My Lai. And Colonel Ernest Medina, who was a colonel, he's a captain, the highest ranking officer present at My Lai, was represented by CIA lawyer F. Lee Bailey, the same lawyer that represented O.J. Simpson and got O.J. Simpson acquitted. Well, guess what? Before O.J. Simpson was acquitted of murder of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, F. Lee Bailey represented Ernest Medina, captain in the United States Army, and got him acquitted of murder. And he's the commanding officer, and over a dozen witnesses testified that they personally saw Ernest Medina with his M16 rifle shoot a woman in the face who was being guarded by two soldiers and had already been searched, pulled out of a ditch, searched, and he shot her and then said, he thought she was going to throw a hand grenade. But he was acquitted. And then they nailed the little man. It was William Cowley did it. He did it. Anyway, then we have Carlos Marcello, who's a very successful tomato salesman in New Orleans. New Orleans Parish, a port city hub for drug distribution, importation, import-exporting for the clandestine services, which, as you know, controls and infiltrates all port facilities in the entire world. The entire world, not just America. Everywhere. Clandestine services are all over the port facilities of your province. So I just want to go back and summarize about the little man. Napoleon was a little man. Charles Miles Maddox was a little man with a huge media profile. Even Geraldo respected the little man. Sirhan is a little man. William Cowley is a little man with a huge media reputation. And Carlos Marcello is a little man with a huge role in the clandestine services, but does not appear on television very much. Anyway, that's 5 men who stood 5 foot 2 inches tall, 1 meter and 6.8 meters tall, 1.68 meters tall. 5 people. 5 historical people. All right, now having set the stage or set the table, let's sit down for dinner and discuss briefly the life of Carlos Marcello. His name is Carlos Joseph Marcello. That's his official name. He was born Calogero Mincore. That's actually his true name. Calogero Mincore. He was born in French Tunisia. Okay, that's important. He's born to Sicilian parents, but he was born in Tunisia, and he maintained Tunisia's citizenship. He eventually received forged Guatemalan citizenship, but that was it. He never ever achieved American citizenship, yet spent almost his entire life in New Orleans Parish and working in and maintaining an office in New Orleans. He conducted most of his meetings, however, at local restaurants because he was always wanting to have private meetings, and he knew that his offices were bugged, not by the FBI, but by the CIA. Okay, he knew that. He worked for the CIA, and he knew that the CIA doesn't trust anybody, including him, even though he is a very loyal soldier to the CIA. Anyway, his cohorts were Clay Shaw and Guy Bannister, and David Ferry was his personal pilot, in case you didn't know. David Ferry is the one who rescued him from Guatemala after Robert Kennedy had him kidnapped and taken to Guatemala during John Kennedy's first weeks as president of the United States. So you should know that, the Kennedys got off real quick like a bunny rabbit making enemies with the CIA and really pissing off Carlos Marcello. Anyway, Santos Trafficante, Sam Giancana were all partners, business partners with Carlos Marcello, who was in the tomato business. That's money laundering vernacular for drug distribution, drug sales, drug distribution wholesale. The same kind of business that Paul Pelosi's father was in. Paul Pelosi's father was a wholesale pharmacist. I mean, we could call Paul Pelosi's father a tomato salesman, right? Except that, see, Carlos Marcello actually had a family farm where they grew tomatoes. He actually had that, and they had a canning facility also. Then he had a place out back that he could put your body if you crossed him, and he put you in some lime, and then later let you loose into the bayou, into the swamp, and then you'd never be found again. Anyway, Carlos Marcello was born February 6, 1910, to Sicilian immigrant parents, Giuseppe and Lucia Menicore in Tunis, French Tunisia. He, with his family, immigrated to the United States, and they settled in a decaying plantation house outside of New Orleans, a suburb of New Orleans in Jefferson Parish. And anyway, he got involved with petty crimes there in the French Quarter and developed sort of a bad reputation, which of course was good for his street credibility. In 1938, Carlos Marcello was arrested and charged with the sale of more than 10 kilograms, which is 23 pounds of marijuana. Big friggin' deal. Despite receiving a rather lengthy prison sentence and a $76,000 fine, which is really large back in 1938, he ended up serving less than 10 months, and he paid $400 in fines. Thanks to the governor, Huey Long, who commuted his sentence. That's code for he was selected for duty in the clandestine services, right? Who are exempt from retribution within the so-called legal system. Anyway, Carlos Marcello became associated with Frank Castellano, who was the leader of the Genovese crime family in New York City in the Big Apple. And at that time, Frank Costello was involved with the transportation of illegal slot machines from New York to New Orleans. Well, of course, they have a franchise in New Orleans, and this, of course, is what Carlos Marcello was granted, was a franchise to gambling machines on behalf of the Genovese family and Frank Costello. Anyway, I'm going to fast forward here because I really want to focus on two quotes that Carlos Marcello has made famous. Not necessarily sure that he created these all by himself, but what you should know is that Carlos Marcello had a long career. He lived until age 83. He died on March 3rd, 1993. That's 3393. For you Masonic people out there, it's a 33. 3393. Died at 83. Had a long career in the clandestine services. It is reported that Carlos Marcello once said the words, well, not only did he say the words, he also had a sign in his business office in New Orleans that read, quote, 3 can keep a secret if 2 are dead. In other words, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. We could ask Jimmy Hoffa, but we can't find him. Jimmy Hoffa worked with Carlos Marcello. And I think he's dead, but we can't prove it because we never found his body. Where are you, Jimmy Hoffa? Where are you, Tom Hanks? Where are you, Anne Heche? Where did you go? Because we never got a body, and I haven't seen a death certificate. Anyway, on the final obituary Carlos Marcello cannot be written until several sources of information have been plumbed further. A Las Vegas entrepreneur, that's code for clandestine soldier, Ed Becker, he was told by Marcello in September 1962, which would have been when he dug himself out of the jungle. They sent him off to the jungle in, I think, February 1961 is when he went packing. So a year after that, he said he would take care of Robert Kennedy and that he would recruit some nut to kill John F. Kennedy so that it couldn't be traced to him, according to several accounts. Well, look, I'm sure that Carlos Marcello participated in the murder of both Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy. I'm sure he had some participation, but he's not running the show because you have to control the media, and Carlos Marcello did not run the media. And it would be a person at a higher pay grade who'd be handling the John F. Kennedy assassination as well as the RFK assassination in Los Angeles. Carlos Marcello is quoted to have said that the dog will keep biting you if you only cut off its tail. He's referring to the Attorney General, or Robert Kennedy, as being the tail of the dog. But the biting would end if the dog's head was cut off. Anyway, in the end, it was John Kennedy's head was blown off with a rifle from the Triple Underpass railroad tracks. And his brain's blown out the back, so that was the end of that story. And Robert Kennedy had his head shot by a .22 caliber pistol behind his right ear. So his head wasn't cut off, but his brain was turned off. Anyway, I thought you'd get a kick out of those quotes from the little man. That's really the only message I had for today. The little man, or the Godfather, is that it's not just Carlos Marcello. It's Napoleon. It's Charles Miles Maddox. I like to call people by their real names, and it's Sirhan Sirhan. It's William Calley, right? It's Carlos Marcello. It's Marcello, Napoleon, Manson, Sirhan Sirhan, William Calley. It's 5. Thanks for listening. Hit the like and subscribe. Have a great day. Bye-bye.